Today, I'll be showing you how to create team loadouts that automatically update for each player. There will be a model of what I show in this video in the important link section of the description, which also has written instructions if it's easier for you. If anything shown in the video changes or does not work by the time you are watching this tutorial, please use the model from the description because I will update it to make sure that everything works properly. If you end up using the model and find it useful, consider leaving a like on the video, and if you have any feedback, let me know by posting a comment so I can continue making those better and easier for you to use in the future. During the video, we'll be creating everything from scratch, so first, make sure you have the Explorer and Properties enabled from the View tab at the top left of the screen. From here, we need to make sure that we first have teams inside of our game, along with spawn points for each team. If you don't have the team service or folder in your game, go to the Model tab at the top left of the screen and click on the Service button. You will then be able to add it in through this menu. Next, you can click the plus button next to the team service and add a team inside. Once you've done that, you can select the team and go down into its properties. For this tutorial, make sure you have the auto-assignable property enabled, and then make sure you change the team color property so that two teams do not have the same team color. So for example, if this team has the team color of New Yeller, make sure no other teams have the exact same one. From here, you can add spawn points into your game through the Model tab by clicking the Spawn button, and once you have the spawn point selected, scroll down in its properties until you see the team color property. You then want to change this property to match up with any of your teams, so I could change this one to be New Yeller, so anyone with the team color that is set to this will spawn right there. Also, make sure you have the neutral property disabled or else anyone will be able to spawn there. And then for this tutorial, enable the Allow Team Change on Touch property so we can walk over these spawn points to change teams. And now before we start creating the system, I'm just going to walk you through the different teams we have and how this is set up. So if you want to skip this part, you can go to the timestamp on screen where we start creating the loadout system. Alright, so here we have 6 different spawn points. These 3 are going to correlate with 3 different teams. The one on the left will be for the cyan team, the one in the middle will be for the yellow team, and the one on the right will be for the orange team. All 3 of these teams are going to have tools, so they will each have their own different loadouts. The spawn point in the middle is going to be a team that does not have any tools for their loadout. So this spawn point will correspond with the team called No Items. At the very right side, we have a neutral spawn point. So this is basically for anyone who does not have a team, they will spawn here. And the last spawn point is going to be for a team that we will add while we are playtesting, just to show you that it can work if you add or create new teams during the game. And now that we have that explained, we can continue with the system. The first thing we need to do is make sure we have tools in our game to create the different loadouts. If you don't already have tools, you can always go to the marketplace inside the toolbox, click on the filter button to the right of the search bar, and then you can type in Roblox inside of the creator section, and this will allow you to filter the toolbox to see models that were only uploaded by a certain account. And I chose the Roblox account because we know that they upload legitimate models. So 3 out of 4 of the team tools that I'm using are from this account. So the sword, the rocket launcher, and then I also have the epic katana. Additionally, I have added the trowel into the game inside of the starter pack, just to show you that this will work if you have items that you want everyone to have access to. Once you have the tools that you need, you can click the plus button next to the server storage and add a folder inside. We are then going to rename this folder to main folder, and this is where we will contain the loadouts for different teams. So I'm going to click the plus button next to the main folder and add a folder inside. Create a new folder for each team that will have their own loadout. Afterward, rename the folder to the exact same name as any of your teams. So if I want the cyan team to have their own loadout, I'm going to rename one of the folders here to match up with that. I'm going to follow the same idea with the yellow team and the orange team, so now we can organize each of the different loadouts. Now you can move any of the tools into these folders. So if I want the cyan team to have the classic slingshot and the classic sword, I'm going to drag these 2 items inside of that folder. And now I'm going to give the yellow team the epic katana, and then I'm going to give the orange team the hyper laser gun. So now that we have this organized, we can create the scripts. So let's open up the server script service, add a folder inside, and rename this to the team loadout system. Inside of this folder, we can then add a normal script, and then we can add a module script. We'll be using these two for different purposes. Just to make it easier, I'm going to rename the module script to be called team loadouts module, and then I'm going to rename the script to be respawn handler. We're going to start off with the respawn handler, and if you need to change the size of the text in the script editor, you can hold Control if you're on Windows or Command if you're on Mac, and scroll up or down, and once you have it at your preference, we can get rid of the text inside and get started. The respawn handler script is going to be responsible for checking whenever someone respawns in the game so that they can be given the correct loadout. So the first thing I'm going to do is reference the player service, because we're going to use this to detect whenever someone joins the game. I'm making the word players equal to something else in our game, and in this case this will be the player service, which contains a list of everyone in the game. By using variables, we can make it much easier for us to understand what we are talking about in different parts of the script, and it'll make our code more efficient. Next, we're going to reference the module script we created because we're going to need to communicate with it to let it know whenever the player needs a new loadout. So I'm going to say local team loadouts is equal to require, and inside the parentheses, I'm going to say script.parent, and then I'm going to type in the name of the module script, which in this case is team loadouts module. When we are requiring another script, that is going to allow us to have access to whatever it returns or gives to us. And this is something I'll explain more once we write the module script. So for right now, we can continue on. Now we can create the function that will be activated whenever someone joins the game. So I'm going to say local function, and I'm going to name this function player join. Before we start writing any code inside this function, we need a way to activate it. And because we want to activate it whenever someone joins the game, we're going to start off by referencing the players service. So now I could say players.playerAdded, and then we can connect this to any function here that we would like. So whenever someone is added into the players service, or whenever they join the game, I want to connect it to the function that is called playerJoin. So here we are using an event, and this is going to allow us to listen for whenever something happens. The good thing about using events is that it also passes some data through. So in this case, since we are activating this function whenever someone joins the game, we will then have a reference to whoever joined. So inside of the parentheses here, I can create a parameter, and in this case, I'm going to say player, because we know it's going to be the player that joined the game. This is useful because then inside of here, we can create another event, but this time we're going to reference the player and listen for whenever their character is added into the game. And this happens whenever they respawn. So we'll be using this to activate a function that will then give the loadout to the player each time they respawn. So here I'm going to connect it to a brand new function, and in this one we are now able to reference their character that respawned. Oh, and additionally, just because we'll be testing this inside of Studio, I'm going to create a loop that will activate this function a second way. Now don't worry about this too much if you don't understand it yet. I'll be explaining loops a little bit more once we get to the module script later. What I'm going to say right here is for underscore, comma player in I pairs, and then inside the parentheses, which is the table that we are going to loop through, I'm going to say players, colon, get players, and then I'll add these parentheses at the end. In short, this will basically look through the player service and create a list of everyone in the game. For each one of the players that it finds in the player service, we want to make sure that we activate this player join function. So I'm just going to say coroutine.wrap, and then inside of here, I'm going to put the name of the function, and then afterward, I'm going to make sure that we send the player through. And this loop is basically going to act as a safeguard just in case the player added function or the player added event does not activate the function when you try to playtest the game in Studio. So don't worry about this too much if it doesn't make much sense. So now we have that out of the way, we can write or continue writing the function up here. For right now, we're going to create some placeholder functions, which we'll continue adding on to after we've created the module script. So inside of here, I'm going to create a brand new function that is called individual item check. And this is where we are going to basically check if a tool that the player equips or unequips is an item that is included in one of the team loadouts, or if it's just a regular item that, let's say, you added through the starter pack. So in order to detect whenever someone equips or unequips a tool, we're going to need to reference the backpack and their character. So right up here, I am going to say local backpack is equal to player wait for a child, and inside the parentheses, I'm going to type in backpack. What this will do is it'll look through the player instance or object inside the player service, and it's going to wait for something that is called backpack. And their backpack is where any of their tools are stored when they do not have it equipped. So at the bottom of the screen, when you see the hotbar or the list of the items there, anything that is unequipped will be in the player's backpack. However, once you equip an item, it'll show up inside of the player's character. So because of this, we know that once someone equips the item, it's going to leave their backpack and enter the character. And when they unequip an item, it's going to leave their character and enter the backpack. So what I'm going to do right below this function is reference each of those items. So I'm going to say character.child added. So whenever a new item is added into the character, we're going to connect it to the function that is called individual item check. I'm going to follow the same idea with the backpack. So backpack.child added, and I'm going to connect it to that same function. And once again, because we are using an event here, certain data will be passed through into the function. In this case, it is going to allow us to reference the item that was added into either the character or the backpack. So inside the parentheses here, I'm just going to say item. And now we'll get back to all of this later and continuing these functions, because now we need to go over into the team loadouts module script and start working on the main parts of the system. So I'm going to get rid of all of the text inside of here, and then we can get started. The reason we are using module scripts for this system is so that it will be much easier to give or remove items from the player when certain things happen in the game. So let's say instead of waiting for someone to respawn to give their new loadouts, you could activate a function inside of this module from a completely different script that would happen when someone steps on a part. By keeping most of the important functions centralized in a single place, it'll make it much easier to modify it in the future, and you won't have to duplicate code a bunch everywhere in each script that you need it for. So the first thing we're going to do in here is create a table that is called team loadouts, and this is going to contain a list of every single item that we added to any of the team loadouts inside of the main folder. And so we don't have to individually type everything out into this table, we're going to automate it through some more functions. So the first thing I'm going to do is reference the server storage, so we are able to access the main folder. So I'm going to say local server storage is equal to game:get service, and I'm going to type in server storage. Now I can reference the main folder by looking through the server storage and finding the main folder. Additionally, right below this, I'm going to reference the team service. So I'm going to say game:get service teams. And this is going to be really important to make sure that we can detect whenever someone changes teams so that their loadout can be updated. So let's say someone is on the cyan team and they swap over to the yellow team. We want to make sure that that player does not have any of the items from their old team. Because they might be able to swap teams without being respawned, we'll make sure to activate a function whenever someone changes teams. But before we get to that, we now need to create the function that will update this team loadouts table. So right below this, I'm going to say local function, and I'm going to call this update team loadouts, add the parentheses at the end, and hit enter. And this is a function that we are going to activate from another function. So right below this, I'm going to create a new one that is called update team list. And this is going to be important because let's say you wanted to add more teams during runtime, or you wanted to add more team loadouts inside of this folder while the game is currently running. We need to make sure that we account for this, or else the script might not be able to detect that there has been a new loadout added. So we're going to start off with activating this function and then work our way upward. So we'll be activating this function two different ways. The first of which is going to be through listening for when something is added into the main folder. So I'm going to reference the main folder, and I'm going to listen for whenever anything is added directly inside. So I'm going to say main folder.child added, and I'm going to connect this to a function. Again, since we're using an event here, we'll have some data that is passed through. Here we'll be able to see what new item was added. So I'm going to reference it by saying item. Or sorry, in this case, we're not going to need that because we can just connect it directly to the update team list function. And that piece of data will be passed through to that function instead. So here I'm just going to say update team list and then close it off with the right parentheses. Afterward, we're going to create a loop that will look through the main folder for all of the folders that are already there when the server starts up. So this is going to handle if any new team loadouts are added, and this loop right below it will handle the ones that are there already. So I'm going to say for underscore, comma team folder in pairs, in I pairs, and inside the parentheses, I'm going to add the table that we want to loop through. So I'm going to say main folder, get children. And now is where I can explain loops just a little bit more. So when we are creating a loop, we are able to reference two different things. In this case, we'll be able to reference the position in the loop. So in this case, I'm just going to say index. I'm going to rename these. And then we can also find the value. So to make this easier, for a second, let's imagine that this main folder is a book. Inside of this book, we have 3 different chapters. And inside of each one of those chapters, we have different things that we talk about in each section. When we are referring to the index in a loop, imagine that as being the number of the chapter. So let's say chapter 1 is called Cyan Team. This is the first chapter or index that the table is going to look through, and once it's done reading it, it can move on to chapter 2. So because we are in the second position of the loop, the index is now going to be 2. And then the same thing, once it completes reading this part, it's going to move on to chapter 3, or in this case, index 3, and then the loop will be finished. On the other hand, the value is going to refer to whatever the item actually is. So in the book example, the value could be referring to the contents of the chapter, or it could be referring to the name of the chapter. It really depends on what you are looping through. And then inside of the parentheses over here, when we are referencing the main folder and calling get children on it, this is where we are basically accessing everything on the first layer of that item. So this could basically be equivalent to saying, okay, I want to get the table of contents inside the book so I could see what every single chapter is. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing for you. I'm going to swap these back to what I had it at before. So since we do not need to know, or we do not need to reference the index for anything, I'm just changing this to an underscore so we know it's not being used. And on the right, I'm going to change this to the team folder, or I'm going to change it to say team folder, because that is what we are referencing inside of this loop. So for each one of the items inside of the main folder, we're going to do something for that. In this case, I am going to activate the function that is called update team list, and I'm going to send the team folder through. And now that we have activated the update team list function over here, we need to make sure that we reference the data that is being passed through. So inside the parentheses, I am also going to say team folder. And the first thing we're going to do inside of this function is make sure that we are receiving the correct data. So we're going to check if what was sent through, so I'm going to say team folder, is a folder. So we're going to make sure that we weren't being sent through a tool or another item. We want it to be a folder so that we know it contains different items. And we're going to also look through the team service, which we referenced up above on line 6, and make sure that we can find something inside of the team service that has the exact same name as the team folder. So I'll say find first child team folder.name. So this is why it's important to make sure the name of the folder corresponds with the name of a team. And this is to make sure that we're not storing random data inside of the team loadouts folder if it's not really for a specific team that we're able to find. So if both of these are the case, then we can continue on. We know that we have received a legitimate folder, and we can add to this function. Now we're almost able to activate the update team loadouts function. We're going to activate this function when 2 different things happen. The first of which is going to be whenever a new item is added to one of these folders. So if you wanted to add a new tool to a team's loadout during the game, this is possible. So what I'm going to say here is team folder, so we have the reference to that folder. Whenever a new child is added into that folder or a new item, we're going to connect this to a function, and then we're going to reference the item that was added. We can then check if that item is a tool, because we do not want to update the table if it's not a tool that the player is able to equip. So if it is a tool, then we're going to activate the function that is called update team loadouts, and we are going to send 2 pieces of data through. The first of which is going to be the name of the item, which will be added to the table. The second one is going to be the name of the team folder, so that we know what loadout it's associated with. We're going to follow the same idea except with another loop. So right below this, I'm going to say for underscore, comma, item in I pairs, and now I'm going to reference the team folder once again, so team folder, :get children. And for each one of the items inside of there that exists when the server starts running, we are going to check for the same thing. If that item is a tool, and actually we could just copy paste this just to save time. If the item inside of the folder is a tool, then we're going to update the team loadouts table with the same information. Additionally, in between these, I'm going to account for a situation where you want to remove a tool from the team loadouts table. So if you remove something from that folder, then we're going to say team folder dot child removed. So when something is removed from the first layer of that folder, we'll connect it to a function, and then we're going to check if that item is a tool, and we're going to see if the item exists inside of the table or if its name is there. So we'll look through the table that is called team loadouts for that item name. So if it happens to find its name inside of the table, then we want to make sure that it's removed. Because if the item is no longer in one of the team loadouts folders, we want to make sure that when we look through the table later on, that change has also been made. So I'm going to reference its value inside the table, I'm going to reference the key, and I'll explain a bit about that in a little bit. And I'm going to remove it entirely. So I'm going to make it equal to nil, which is basically non-existent. So this would basically clear it from the table entirely. So now that we have done this, we can scroll up over to the update team loadouts function and complete this one. As a reference point, remember that we are sending 2 pieces of data through into this function. The first one will be the name of the item, and the second one will be the name of the team folder, which is going to be the name of one of the teams. So over here, I'm going to reference that accordingly. The first thing I'm going to say is tool name as the first parameter, and the second one will be the name of the team, so team name. And inside this function, we want to make sure that both pieces of data were sent through so that we are able to properly update the table. So I'm going to say if tool name and team name. So this will make sure that those values have returned true, which basically means that something is there, something exists. Because let's say we didn't send something through for the second parameter, it is going to return nil. Because nothing was sent through, nothing exists for that parameter. So if 2 pieces of data were sent through, then we're going to see if there is not already a listing inside of the team loadouts function that has the exact same name as one of the tools, then we can add it to the table. So what I'm going to do here is once again reference the team loadouts table, and I am going to make the key, which is going to be on the left side of the table or dictionary, equal to the name of the tool, and the value on the right side is going to be made equal to the name of the team. If this is a little bit confusing, let me explain, because a dictionary, which is what we are using in this case, is a little bit different from the normal table or array that we were referencing all the way down here. So let's go up here and I'll just use this one as an example. So a dictionary is basically going to allow us to store a value for something in a much more specific manner. So while an array, let's just say, for example, we're looping through the main folder over here, an array could look like this. It could say, cyan team, and then afterward it would be yellow team, and then after that it would be orange team. And again, this would reference, or here we could reference the index. So this is position 1, this is position 2, and this is position 3. Instead of doing this, we can make it much more specific. So I could bring this down a bit, and I could then say something such as loadout 1 is equal to cyan team. And then afterward, I could say loadout 2 is equal to, like yellow team, and then so on and so forth. What we are basically doing right here is this sort of concept, except with the name of the item. So on the left side, it's going to be the name of something that that team has. So let's say the classic sword is something that'll be here. So it could be classic sword, and then the name of the team it's for. On the next line, it could also be that with another item. So here it could be classic slingshot, and it will also be the name of that team. But then for another team, let's say these are all the items we have for the cyan team. The next listing could show up as epic katana, and that is equal to the yellow team. So this is basically what the table is going to look like once it's updated from this function. And this will allow us to more quickly see if an item that the player has is meant for a team loadout, and then we could see what team that is meant for. And if this was a little bit confusing still, don't worry, this along with some other concepts will be included, or resources about these concepts will be included in the important link section of the description if you're interested in reading more, and I would highly suggest it anyway. So now that we have completed these functions right here, we can move on to the ones that will handle giving the items and removing the items from each player. So we can scroll down below all of these and start writing down here. But right before creating these functions, I'm going to create a brand new table that will contain all of them. So I'm going to say local main functions is equal to this blank table. This is important because within a module script, we need to return some data, which in this case will be a table, so that once other scripts require it, or they basically ask it like, hey, do you have anything I need to know? And then the module script is going to say, yep, here's this table of functions that you can use. So we'll be using this to store some different functions. So right below it, I'm going to create the first function inside of this table, which is going to be used for clearing the items from the player. So I'm going to say function main functions dot item check, then I'll add these parentheses at the end and hit enter. What we are doing here is we are storing a function that is called item check inside of this table. Make sure you do not use local function for anything that is going to be directly contained inside of the table that will be returned or given to the other scripts. So once we finish this part of the module script and return this table, the other script that we have, which is the respawn handler, is going to have access to any of those functions. If you set it up as a local function, it's not going to work properly. So we'll add more to this function later. What we are going to do next is create another function that will be responsible for giving the items to the player. So I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to add it to the main functions table, but instead I'm going to call it give items. And then this is something that we now need to go down a few lines and activate it in another way. So if you remember earlier how I mentioned that we are going to make sure that whenever someone changes teams, they'll be able to receive their new loadout, this is what we are going to do right here. So we're going to activate this function whenever someone changes teams. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a new function where all of this will be handled. So I'm going to say local function team change, and then I'm going to add parentheses at the end and hit enter. We are also going to activate this one in two different ways, and the first of which will be whenever a new team is added into the team service. So if you add any more teams in while the game is already running. So here I'm going to say teams, since we can reference the service. We created a variable for this at the top of the script, .child added, and then we'll connect it to a function. So we'll be able to reference the new item that was sent through, and we're going to make sure that team is a team so that we know it's not just like some random item. And if that is the case, then we're going to update this function and send the team through. In addition to this, we are also going to create a loop right below it, which will activate this function for every team that already exists inside of the game. So down here, I'm going to say for underscore comma team in I pairs, and then I'll say teams :get teams. And then for each of the teams that are inside of the team service, I'm going to activate the team change function. So I'll say team change, and then I could send that team through. So, since we are activating this function and sending data through, we need to make sure we have a proper reference for it. So right here, I'm going to say team. What I can then do with this direct reference to each team is check whenever a player is added into each one of them. So when someone joins a new team, this function will be activated and we'll be able to see who joined that team. So whenever this happens, we want to activate the give items function. So I'm going to say main functions because the function is being stored in this table, and then I'm going to reference its name and send the player through it. And actually, I just realized I could probably do it through here. So I could just say main functions dot give items instead. So I think that'll be the better way to go about this. So I can remove this right here, and now we can continue on, starting off this function. And once again, since this is being activated from some different events, we need to make sure that we reference the data that was passed through. In this case, we know that it's going to be a player who is sent to this function. And just in case something else gets sent to this function, we're going to make sure that we check that it is a player. So we'll need to make sure that it's a player. And we are doing this precautionary check just to make sure that when we reference the player's character, that the script doesn't end up erroring. So again, the first thing that will happen inside of this function is we are going to check if the character exists, because that is where the items will go once the player has equipped a tool. So I'll say local character is equal to player.character, or just in case this function was activated before it has loaded in, we'll say player.character added :wait. And this will ensure that if it already exists, it can be referenced, and if it's not there, then we'll just wait for it to load into the game. In addition to this, we are going to reference the player's backpack. So I could say local backpack is equal to player :wait for child, and inside of the parentheses, I'll type in backpack. And this is where we are actually going to place the items. However, before we give any items to the player, we are first going to activate the function that will clear the items or check if they have any items that are not for their team. So we can reference the function that is called clear items. So main functions dot clear. Oh, wait a second. Where is it? Oh, whoops. I didn't mean to call this one item check. I meant to call it clear items. I think I typed item check because that's something that we're going to contain within this function later on. So this will be clear items. I should put something on the screen when I type this out earlier in the video, so you should know by now. But just in case you skip past that part for some reason, now you know. So now we can reference the function that is called clear items, and we are going to send two pieces of data through. The first of which is going to be the player, and the second of which will be the container that we want the script to look through. So the first one we'll send is the backpack. Afterward, we are going to send through the character. So I'll send through the player and the character. And we are doing this in the case that the player currently has an item equipped, because that is when the tool will be in their character. And for any other items that are not equipped, that will be in their backpack. So once that function has finished looking through both of those different containers, then it'll continue down below it and start checking for some additional conditions. So because this is referring to any of the team loadouts, let's make sure that the player has a team. So if the player has a team and they are not neutral, which basically means that they do not have a team, then we know we're safe to continue on and look for something inside of the main folder that has the name of their team. So inside of here, I'm going to say local team folder is equal to looking through the main folder for something that is called, for something that has the exact same name as the player's team. If it finds that team folder, then we know that we can grant the items inside of it to the player. Once again, we're adding all of these different checks in place just to make sure that it doesn't error at any point, because if we try to look through the main folder for the player's team name when they do not have a team, the script could break. And then if we just try to immediately loop through this folder and give the items to the player when it doesn't exist, then the script could error as well. So we're making sure at every single step we add these so that it works completely fine. So if all of these conditions were true, then we can create a loop. And this loop is going to look through the team folder. So I'm going to say for underscore comma tool in I pairs, and I'm going to reference the team folder that contains all the items. I will then call getChildren on this so we can turn that folder into a table. Next, I'm going to create two different variables which we will utilize to check if the player already has the tool. We are going to do this to make sure that they don't receive an additional item. So I'm going to say local backpack check is equal to looking through the player's backpack and seeing if it can find something with the same name as one of the tools. Additionally, we'll do the same thing, but with the character. So looking through the character for something that has the same name as the tool. Right below this, we are then going to make sure that they do not have anything inside of their backpack or their character with that same name. So if not backpack check and not character check, then we know we're safe to give the item to the player so that they'll only have one version of it. So now what we could do is say local cloned tool is equal to creating a cloned version of the tool inside of the team folder. And then right below it, we can place that clone tool or change its parent to the player's backpack. The reason we are creating a clone of the tool instead of giving it directly is so that there's always a tool left in the folder. Because let's say the first person to join joins the Cyan team. If we just move these tools directly into their backpack, there's not going to be anything left in the folder. So that's why we need to make a clone of it before giving it to the player. So now I believe that we have completed the give items function right here. I'll just remove some of the spaces here. And now we can move on to the clear items function before going back over to the respawn handler and pretty much just connecting these functions here to a respective function within the module script. So right before we start writing inside this function, remember right down here inside of the give items function, we are sending through two pieces of data. The first one is going to be the player, and the second one will be the container that we're looking through. So something that contains items, which in this case will be the backpack or the character. Additionally, we are going to add a third parameter, which will be for an individual item, which we are going to add over here, or we are going to send it from the respawn handler later on. So we don't need to worry about this parameter until we get back to that script. And now that we know what we have for the parameters here, we can start it off by checking once again if the player is a player, just in case you're activating it from a completely different a completely different script. We want to make sure that the right piece of data was sent through. So if it's a player, then we can continue. We are then going to create a separate function inside of here, which will handle checking if the item is inside of the team loadouts table at the top of the script. I'm not going to scroll there, this is too far. So yes, this function is going to be responsible for checking if an item is contained within the team loadouts table, in addition to removing the item from the player's backpack or character if they are not on the same team that the item is meant for, in addition to the instance where a player is not on a team at all. But we will need to activate this function in a few different ways from down below. So now we could go down here and start writing some more conditions that we need to check for. So the first one is going to be if an individual item was sent through. And now if that was the case, then immediately we're just going to go ahead and activate the item check function, sending that item directly to it. But let's say this wasn't the case. Let's say we sent through the player's backpack or the character. Then we're going to say else if. So if the first condition was not met, then it will check if this one was true. So if the container was sent through instead, then we are going to create a loop through this container. So we'll say for underscore comma item in I pairs, we're going to say container colon get children to turn it into a table. And then for each one of those items, we're going to make sure that it is a tool. So if item is a tool, and actually I'm going to do the same thing over here just to make sure. If individual item is a tool, then we're going to activate the item check function with that one. So sorry if I'm going a bit too fast here. but I can always go back through it and explain it a little bit more. So if an item inside of the container that we're looking through is a tool, then we can go ahead and activate the item check function, sending that tool through it. All right, so now this part here at the bottom of the script, which will be responsible for activating the item check function when certain conditions are met, has been completed. I'll just go through it really quick because I feel like I went through it really fast. So what we're doing here is we're splitting these up into two different conditions because we are only going to be sending one of them through at a time. So that means we'll only be sending through the player and the container, or the player and the individual item. We will never send all three pieces of data at the same time. And this is because there are going to be certain instances, let's say whenever the player equips or unequips a tool, we're just going to make sure that individual item is something that they're supposed to have. But if someone respawns, or let's say, someone changes teams, we're going to look through their entire character and backpack to make sure they don't have any items that they're not supposed to have. So that's what we're doing here. If it's only one item, we're just going to send that single item through. If we got sent through a container, we're going to send every item through. And now that we have activated this item check function, we can make sure that we reference the item that was sent through, and then we could do some additional checks and continue on. So inside this function, the first thing we are going to do is look through the team loadouts table for that item. So I could say loadout check is equal to looking through the team loadouts table for the name of that item. If it happens to find that item inside of the loadouts table, then we can go ahead and see if the player has a team, or I guess the first thing we want to do is check if the player does not have a team. So if the player is neutral, or they just don't have a team, which could be, the same thing, then we're just going to get rid of the item entirely. And this is because, once again, anything stored in the team loadouts table is going to be an item that is meant for a particular team. If a player's not on any team, then we know we're safe to destroy the item entirely because they shouldn't have it at all. However, we then need to check if the player is on a team, because we do not want to remove the item if they're meant to have it. So else if player.team, so if they do have a team, and they are not neutral, then we can check for some more things. And actually, the only thing we need to check is if the current name of the player's team is not equal to the value stored for a loadout check. Because once again, the name of the item is stored on the left side of the dictionary, and the value that is associated with it is the name of the team. So if the player's team name doesn't match up with that value, then it basically means that, hey, the item is meant for players on another team and you're not on that team, so we are then going to remove that item from your character or your player. And now I think this function is complete. So the next thing, or pretty much the last thing that we need to do, is activate some of these functions from the respawn handler. So I'm going to go over to the respawn handler, and now we can add some different things into this function right here, and then one more which will check for whenever the player's neutral property changes right afterward. So, and actually right before this, there's one thing we could do right away, and that is going to be to activate the give items function. So I'm going to reference the team loadouts module script, which again, we referenced on line 2, and I am going to reference the give items function. So give items, and then we're going to send that player through. Afterward, let's add some code into this individual item check function. So pretty much the only thing we need to do here, because this is whenever a tool, or I guess an item, is added into the player's character or their backpack, we just need to check if that item is in fact a tool. So if it is a tool, then we're going to activate the team loadouts function, so team loadouts, and we're going to clear items. So team loadouts.clear items, we're going to send through the player. We're going to send through nil because the second parameter is supposed to stand for the container that is being sent through. And then we're also going to send through that item. So again, because we're only going to be checking for this singular item, we do not want to send a container through it. Just going to be the item we want to check, like, hey, is this item good or not? Are they allowed to have it? And that's all we'll need to do there. So now that we have completed this function, we just need to add one more thing and then we should be good to go. So I'm going to scroll up here, and in between the character added event and the start of the function right here, I'm going to reference the player. And the reason we're going to do this is because we want to check whenever the neutral property of the player changes. So I'm going to say get property, change signal, and then inside of the parentheses, I'm going to put the name of the property that we want to listen for. So in this case, I'm going to say neutral. And this is important because whenever the player's neutral property changes, they will either join a team or they will not have a team at all. So, if a player joins a neutral team, or sorry, I guess it's not really a team. If a player is neutral, then we want to make sure that we remove any of the team only items that they have. So what I'm going to do here is connect this to a function, and then I'm going to check if the player is neutral. So if player.neutral, then we can continue on, because we only want to clear their items once again if the neutral property is equal to true. So what I am then going to do here is reference the player's backpack. Then I'm going to reference their character like we did before. So player.character or player.character added :wait. And then if the player's character exists, if the player's backpack exists, then we're going to activate the function that will clear their items. So I'm going to say team loadouts.clear items, send the player through, send the container through that we want to be cleared, and then going to do the same thing with the character. If character, then we'll do the exact same thing, except with their character model. So now that we've done this, we can test this out. So as a quick reminder, for the cyan team, we're going to have two different tools. The yellow and orange team will only have one tool apiece, and then we're going to have a single item that will be given to the player upon respawning that is not related to any of the teams. So that will be the classic trowel. So just keep that in mind. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on play. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I forgot this. Oh, I'm so silly. Sorry, I forgot to add this earlier. We need to go back into the module script, and at the very bottom, we need to return the table that contains all of these main functions. So I'm going to say return main functions. So now what this will do is it will return the table that we created up here, which contains the clear items function and the give items function. Oh man, I can't believe I forgot that one. But now that we have that out of the way, we could go ahead and hit play and give it another try. So I have spawned over here. I am neutral. And this is the tool that we added into the starter pack, the classic trowel. So I'm going to go over here and start with one of these teams. So the cyan team, this one has two different tools over here. And if I go over to the yellow team, the other tools are removed, and now we have the item. Wow, that's very broken now. I see. That is a very old tool. Now I'm going to go over to the orange team. We are given this brand new item. And just to show you that it works when we're holding the item out, there you go. And then I'm going to go on over to this team, which will have no items. And then I'm going to do the same thing, except with the neutral team. So this is neutral. And now those tools got removed as well. As another example, let me just drop one of these tools. So let's drop the sword. Oh, I don't know why I got set to neutral. That was weird. Okay, I don't know what happened there. Hold on, let me restart this test. Let's go ahead and hit play again. So I'm going to drop this tool right here. And okay, I did not get set to neutral this time. I'm not sure why that happened. But now let me change teams. And if I try to pick this item up now, okay, so we get that error in the output now. And I think I know why that's happening. So let's go back into the script and resolve this really quickly. So I believe what is happening is that we are trying to destroy the item way too quickly. So if I go over here into the team loadouts module, we can go and fix this. So what I'm going to do is scroll up to the very top. Sorry, not the very top. We're going to go over to the clear items function and give this a test. What I'm going to do is if this individual item, if the individual item was sent through, then we're just going to wait 1 second just to make sure it is not removed too quickly. I can then go back over here and play test it once again, and it should be fine. So, okay, neutral this time. Let me go over here. Cyan team, let's drop the sword. Change teams. Let's pick this up. And now it was removed from my character. And we could always change the delay on that to be a little bit different, but I just did that one to make sure that it would give enough leeway. So now let's pretend that we add a new team into... Or sorry, let's not do that first. Let's pretend we add a new tool into one of the team loadouts. So I'm going to open up the server storage, and in order to do that while playtesting, I need to click on the button that says current client, and now I'm going to see what the server sees instead of what the client or the player sees. So now I can open up the server storage and I can access the main folder right here. I am then going to open up the replicates. Oh, and I just realized I think I forgot to add another tool into here as an example. So let me just do that really quick. I'm going to click on stop, add one in from the toolbox. All right, so I have added a new tool into the game, which is from the Roblox account. It is the Super Ball. And what I'm going to do just to make this a little bit easier to set up is I'm going to add a folder directly into the server storage. And this is just going to be the name of a test team. So I'm going to rename this to the name of the team that I'll create. I'll just say test team. And then inside of here, I'll just toss in, not that item, I'll toss in the classic Super Ball. Next, I'm going to add a team into the team service. And this one I'm going to call test team, so it aligns with the name of that folder. And I'm going to make sure its team color matches with this spawn point. So this one is set to really red. So I'm going to change the test team to be really red as well. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this team over here, let's just say temporarily, into the replicated storage. And now what I'm going to do is add this team back into the team service once we playtest. And this will basically simulate if you added a new team into the team service, in addition to a new folder inside of the main folder during runtime. And I just realized I do need to add one more item to add to the existing team loadout, so I've added in the classic paintball gun. Sorry, I have to add so many things in, but this is just to show you that it works in all of these different scenarios. So now I can click on play, and what I'm going to do is go over here. And actually, wait, did I set up this team properly? Oh wait, yeah, we're not going to be able to join that team yet. So I'll start on this team. I'm going to swap on over to the server. I am going to move the team from the replicated storage into the team service. Then I am going to move the folder that contains this item into the main folder. Now what I can do is walk on over here, and now I've been given that new item that wasn't there previously. Additionally, let's say I wanted to add a new item to this team over here, the orange team. Let's move this classic paintball gun inside. Now what I could do is once I swap teams and go back, now I have an additional item. So it shows you that this works in all of these different scenarios. And since you've made it this far, post a comment down below to suggest what tutorial I should create next, along with any feedback about what I could do better to make these tutorials more enjoyable and easier for you to learn from. Remember to like the video if this helped, along with checking out my Roblox Studio tutorial series that will have dozens of other useful videos through the card at the top right of the screen or via the playlist in the description below. Thank you guys for sticking around. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, or whatever time it is there for you. And I hope to see you next time. So, bye-bye.